The following is a production of the Pritzker Military Museum and Library.
This program was sponsored by the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation.
Bringing citizens and citizen soldiers together through the exploration of military history, topics, and current affairs. This is Pritzker Military Presents.
Welcome to a special edition of Pritzker Military Presents, featuring a discussion by Dr. Carla Narowski, Major General John Borling, Samuel R. Harris, and Newton Minow. I'm your host, Ken Clark, and this program is coming to you from the Pritzker Military Museum and Library in downtown Chicago and is sponsored by the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation. This program, and more than 400 others covering a full range of military topics, is available on demand at pritzkermilitary.org. In November 1863, just 5 months after the Civil War's deadliest clash, President Abraham Lincoln and other Union leaders gathered to dedicate the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. In the course of just 2 minutes, Lincoln used 272 words in 10 sentences to mark the enormity of the battle and to rededicate the nation to the preservation of freedom. Today, the Gettysburg Address is a cornerstone of who we are as a nation, and 150 years later is perhaps the most important statement of America's commitment to personal liberty since the Revolutionary War. In the new book, Gettysburg Replies, the world responds to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. The Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation challenged presidents, judges, historians, filmmakers, poets, actors, and others to craft 272 words of their own to celebrate Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address, or a related topic that stirs their passions. Also featuring important documents and artifacts, the book combines words and images to create a lasting tribute not only to Lincoln himself, but to the everlasting impact of his devotion to freedom. Dr. Carla Narowski is Chief Executive Officer of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation and editor of Gettysburg Replies. In 2013, she conceived and co-curated an exhibit at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum called The Power of Words, commemorating the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address and resulting directly in the publication of the book. A writer, her work appears in Lincoln, An Intimate Portrait, and in the forthcoming Under Lincoln's Hat. She also writes a regular column for Fourscore&Seven, the official magazine of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation, and has been featured in Celebrated Living magazine. Please join me in welcoming to the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, Dr. Narowski, and our distinguished panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to start by introducing my fellow panelists, each of whom is a contributor to Gettysburg Replies. Newton Minow is an attorney, author, World War II veteran, and former chairman of the FCC. He is the Walter Annenberg Professor Emeritus at Northwestern University and is a senior counsel in the Chicago office of Sidley Austin, where he was a partner for 26 years. He is the recipient of 14 honorary degrees and numerous professional awards, including the American Bar Association Silver Gavel Award and the American Lawyer Lifetime Achievement Award. Major General Borling is a Silver Star recipient and a 37-year veteran of the United States Air Force, where he was a fighter pilot and commander of the famed Hat in the Ring Squadron. A native Chicagoan, General Borling is founder and chair of SOS America and is author of Taps on the Walls, published by the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, a book of poetry originally composed during his 6.5 years as a POW in Vietnam. Samuel Harris is a Polish expatriate and Holocaust survivor who spent more than 5 years in Nazi concentration camps as a child during World War II. He is President Emeritus of the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center in Skokie, Illinois, and is a recipient of the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. His autobiography, Sammy, Child Survivor of the Holocaust, has been published in 5 languages. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you all so much for being here. We all know what the project's about, and we had a little bit of an introduction, but at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation in 2013, when it was the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address, we have a copy. We have the Everett copy of that address in our collection. And we could put it out, and we did, but we wanted to do something that was extra special, and so we created the 272-word project. And obviously, Abraham Lincoln didn't set out to write 272 words like we challenged you to do, but we thought that this was a way where people from all walks of life could walk for a moment in Abraham Lincoln's shoes and kind of grasp what it was that he was able to do, the enormity of what he was able to achieve in those 272 words. So many people responded. We were overwhelmed, more than 1,000 responses. And Gettysburg Replies represents a compendium of 100 of those essays that came back to us. And we're hoping through this book that 10 years from now, 150 years from now, 300 years from now, it will stand as a compendium of 21st century thought of what people like you and from other walks of life thought about Abraham Lincoln or the Gettysburg Address or an issue which stirred your passions. The thing that we have responded to, the most important, one of the most important pieces of writing in American history, if not world history, is the Gettysburg Address. And in this regard, I would like to ask General Borling to recite it for us, if you would.
Well, it's a high honor to do so. I am aware that Lincoln was invited to Gettysburg just 2 weeks before the actual event, and that the famed orator Edward Everett from Massachusetts was to speak and be the big dog, if you will. And in fact, he spoke for 2 hours. And then finally they called on President Lincoln to offer appropriate remarks. And this is what he said. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Let's together follow that life a bit tonight. I think, in truth, that recognition is given for the Lincoln spirit that imbues all of us, the spirit of America.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, it is, as I said, one of the, if not the most powerful speeches in the history of our nation and in the world. And it's a hard act to follow. And in fact, when we were inviting people to write their 272 words, we had a few people who thought, I just can't even touch this. But you three gentlemen did. And I'd like to start with Newt and ask Newt Minow to read his 272 words.
Well, when Carla asked me to do this, I struggled with it because she said it's got to be 272 words. And well, here's the best that I could do. If Abraham Lincoln gave his Gettysburg Address today, he would look out of the crowd, busy checking its email, updating Facebook, texting on iPhones and iPads, and tweeting with the hashtag Address More Talk from Lincoln. Most people in the immediate audience wouldn't be paying full attention, and they would miss one of the great messages in American history. Ironically, at the same time, men, women, and children throughout the world could see and hear Lincoln through radio, television, streaming the internet, cable, satellites, and Google. A paradox of our time. Lincoln redefined American ideals of freedom and equality. His dedication to the unfinished work of seeking justice set a goal we are still trying to achieve 70 years later. What Lincoln gave us at Gettysburg was his vision that each new generation would enlarge the meaning of equality. Jefferson, in the Declaration of Independence, wrote that all men are created equal. But in the past 150 years, women, blacks, people with disabilities, gays and lesbians all argued that that statement should include all people. We've made big strides, but we have not yet fully succeeded. Abraham Lincoln's words continue to inspire us with his dream that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. Today's technology gives us access to more information than ever before in human history, but we have less understanding. The power of the Gettysburg Address reminds us that we have so much more to learn, and that we should listen more carefully to each other.
Hear, hear.
So Newt, I can't help but ask you, when you wrote this, do you think that Lincoln, were he alive today, would tweet it out? Do you think he'd have a Facebook account?
Mm-hmm. I think Lincoln was a progressive in every way, and I believe President Lincoln would have been on top of all the new technology.
And also on the issues that you brought up, the freedoms sought today?
There's no question. I think he would be in the leadership of redefining and expanding equality.
You know, one of the things that we were amazed at was that all 5 living American presidents, we also had an essay from Lech Wałęsa from Poland, wrote essays. You were a friend of President Kennedy's. If he were alive today and were able to write an essay for us, what do you think he would write about?
If I have a chance, I want to tell an extraordinary experience we had with President Kennedy. When I was at the FCC, we were invited one night to the living quarters at the White House. Bob Kennedy had created a group called the Hickory Hill Seminar, where different outside authorities would come to lecture to us on something that had nothing to do with what was going on at the moment in the government. In the evening, we went to the White House with President Kennedy. He had a professor from either Yale or Princeton, I'm not sure, named David Donald, who was an authority on the Reconstruction period. And he was making the point that if Lincoln was going to be assassinated, in terms of his place in history, that was exactly the right moment to be assassinated. The war was over, the North had won, the slaves were freed, we were going back to normal life. If he had been assassinated 2 years before, this is what the professor said, people would have said, oh, he doesn't know how to pick generals, he doesn't know what to do with the slaves, he's not competent to be president. If he'd been assassinated 2 years later, people would have said, the president doesn't know what to do, he can't reconstruct the South, things are a failure. So he said if Lincoln could have picked the moment, he was going to be assassinated, that was the moment.
There's an amazing historical congruence because it was 100 years from Gettysburg to 1963 when, of course, President Kennedy was assassinated. But not to be flip, but we used to have a saying in the military that there's nothing so much that encourages the troops as to see a dead general on the battlefield. And it doesn't even matter what side he's on. Now, that's a flip statement. But what Newt was saying quite seriously is that there is that point in history where the assassination of Lincoln was probably impetus to not only the elevation of the Lincoln persona, but to a spirit of America that endures to this day.
Right. I never forgot that.
Well, very interesting. And you know, I have to say that President Kennedy and President Lincoln were two of our more poetic presidents. They were very lyrical in their language. They were great communicators because of their lyricism and their poetic nature of their writing. Which brings me to General Borling, and I'd like you to read a bit from your, or all, as much as you'd like. You chose to write.
It's only 272 words.
That's right. Yeah, so you have the choice, but you chose to write a poem, which I also feel is very interesting because Nikki Giovanni, the poet, was invited to write, and she wrote prose. And I said, it's very interesting. We have a poet writing prose, and we have a general writing poetry. And what is also interesting is you chose to write, I think at least, if it's difficult to write 272 words in prose, how about doing it in metered rhyming poetry? So if you would share with us.
Can I beat my chest now, or do we have to do that later?
After you've read.
You know, just a word on structure, if I may. It's an 11 quatrain or 4-line set of poem, or a poem, with a repetitive rhyme scheme, because if you think about the numbers, it was the 11th month. There is in war, as Newt knows, and Sam certainly knows, unfortunate repetition of things that seem on one hand so unhelpful and on the other hand so liberating. So I chose a rhyme scheme that was in fact repetitive in each quatrain. And then, because the name of the poem is A Common Path Taken, tried to encapsulate common human themes and the profession of arms, if you will, as they have progressed over the years, and then to bring it into more specific terminology with respect to 63. I'm a member of the class of 63 from the Academy. 100 years after Gettysburg, my class graduated from the United States Air Force Academy, just to give you a sense of how tight time frames are that we actually work with. And then Elizabethan sonnet style, I tried in the last couple of quatrains to wrap up the controversy and the thoughts that are resonant here in the poem. Now, if you're a Petrarchan sonnet lover, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed with that, but if you're an Elizabethan, then I suspect you'll take great satisfaction from that. I would hope so.
You knew what I was.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, here we go. So, A Common Path Taken, reflections on Gettysburg and the quests and costs. for better lives and times. The furrowed way in wood or plain, so deeply carved for human gain, but loss of bounds and much shared pain attend well-trodden past terrain. Yet, who recalls that folly rules, though thought at home and taught in schools? The drumbeat dims, the ardor cools. Imperfect world, in march the fools. This fateful clutch of circumstance, do gods ordain, or look askance as sheltered shield and ready lance provide historical advance? Perceptions public men implore to rally fear and hate and more. Give Plato due. The words abhor, dead only, see the end of war. The only animal is man, idea creature, that he can go win the day, be better than go fight and die, the battle plan. Isaiah criticized for speech. Smooth words do not the mind impeach, but truth falls harsh and hard to teach. These words will frame, but not beseech. So nations fray and nations fight, and none escape the civil plight. Await awakening, 12th night, for lamp of liberty to light. And strewn, like poppies of the field, the sons with stones who lay concealed, their silent stories gone to greater yield, while silent seasons damage healed. That's not the case in '63, a turning point in history. The war not won, in short, would be at Gettysburg a Lincoln plea. An exhortation long denies the ear and mind with dull disguise, but presidential skill applies a dedication's firm reprise. Remembered well, known words endure, a testament, ideals du jour, a challenge vision to assure, by fractured man, ablution pure. Well, I did the best I could, so that's
Very good. Fantastic.
Well, as I said...
that's the first public reading, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. We're very honored. We were honored
Maybe
anyway.
the last,
but,
for
yeah.
all I know. But I mean,
I don't think so. As I mentioned, Abraham Lincoln loved poetry, and he also loved writing it. Where did this love of poetry come from? And it certainly had an impact with Taps on the Walls when you were in Vietnam.
Yeah, I've got an engineering degree from the academy, but I majored in humanities. And I've always been a big believer that we neglect the liberal arts education in America at our peril. So I did have, through some of the colleges I went to before I went to the academy, I'm kind of a slow learner, exposure at the collegiate level to literature and the various forms and things. And you'd be surprised to know that as we tapped through the walls one to another in those, or over those many years, especially in the early brutal years, that if you had something memorized, like the Gettysburg Address or like the poem If by Kipling, that there was a real hunger for this. So in my case, I mentally composed and then kept memorized, and I didn't have anything to write with, that book that I buried for 40 years when I got out. And it was because of that liberal arts upbringing that I had those skills, if you will, that I had that understanding of format, that I could make time an ally by doing what I think is the essence of the human condition. And Sam can probably comment more to this in terms of extreme conditions, but in the end, the essence of the human condition, and God knows we needed humanity, God knows you needed humanity. That's the ability to create.
Absolutely.
It gives you staying power in an uncertain race.
Well, you know, Abraham Lincoln wrote one of his first poems as a teenager. Mm-hmm. And he actually wrote it in a book that he called his sum book, or his ciphering book. And he wrote it, like many school children do, on the first page of his book to let people know that it was his book. And he wrote something to the effect, I don't know if I have it exact, but Abraham Lincoln is my name, and with this pen I wrote the same. I wrote it here in haste and speed, and left it here for fools to read. And as a teenager, I'm sure he was playing a trick on his teacher or whoever, and he only had 1 year of formal schooling. But that brings us to Sam and his story, because what General Borling just referred to with the humanity, that what you had to endure as a child of the Holocaust is simply extraordinary. And I visited the Illinois Holocaust Museum, which you were responsible for its building. And when I was there, I read this essay by you. And when we were doing this book, I thought, well, it would be great to have Sam write an essay. And then I thought, well, what about that essay? And it was interesting because you wrote that as a teenager after the Holocaust, once you were here in America. Mm-hmm. And when we counted up the words, serendipitously, it was 273 words.
Really?
But you had one word in parentheses. And I called Sam up and I said, Sam, could you get rid of that word? And could you submit this for the book? And so I don't want to take away all your thunder, but we would be honored right now if you read to us what you wrote as a teenager at New Trier High School a couple decades ago.
Sure. First of all, may I tell you, John, you read all the good stuff.
Well, I just read your book again yesterday, so yes, I read all the good stuff.
And Newt, in all due respect, I would have preferred Lincoln living another 2 years. Yeah, Lincoln and I had this in common. Neither of us had to worry about the 272 words. Right. All I ever wanted to do was just fulfill an assignment and write something that was meaningful to me. I was 15 years old, 15 and a half. I had just come to this country 3 years earlier. I couldn't speak English. Oh, I spoke 3 words. They had learned them on the ship called the Ernie Pyle. You probably knew that name. And they were yes, no, and Coca-Cola. Those were the 3 words that I knew. And I fulfilled my assignment, which was to write. I was adopted here, and my adoptive mother somehow found this and saved it, and it ended up, I guess, with all the other things that I handed into the museum. And the next thing I knew, it was permanently saved there, and then you walked by. The first language I ever spoke was Yiddish. That was the first language. And there is a word in Yiddish, it's called beshert, meant to be. So I can't help but think that essay that I'm about to read, and the 272 words, I actually had 73. I didn't want to be better than Lincoln, so we cut it down to 272. And I read it since then, and I liked it. My English was good and all of that. So I will continue. I will start by reading it as you requested.
Thank you.
Carlin. America is indeed the best place on earth. Most people born in America may not think of it the same way that I do, because all the freedoms come to them as natural as breathing. I, being born in Europe and living through the war, have a different respect for democracy as being practiced in the United States. Not until about 3.5 years ago did I know what democracy was. Then the day came. I moved to this free country. This was a complete change for me in the way people lived and the language they spoke. In all the countries I have been, including Poland, my birthplace, Austria or Germany, did the people move so freely and live in such modern countries. Then, still on the harbor ship, the Ernie Pyle, I stared at all the million of lights which brightened the night. Between the large buildings and our ship on the water, there lay a little island on which rested the Statue of Liberty. Even not knowing yet what this huge figure was, I stared at it with great interest. Then I questioned. When I realized what it symbolized, that much more my eyes brightened with freedom and my heart beat like drums of peace. Now I have lived in this heaven for 3.5 years, and still I think of those first visions of real human life, which all people all over the world should someday experience. My heart should, I hope, will never let me forget the sight of liberty my eyes saw on the first night in America. God bless America.
That was wonderful, Sam. Every time I hear you read it, it's just a magnificent essay. I'm curious because now you have so many years in the United States and you've accomplished so much, and you've been a part of this society, and you know what the Statue of Liberty is like, and you now know Lincoln. Would you, if we gave you the task to write from scratch, like our other esteemed guests, would you choose this as a topic? Is there another topic that you might write about?
I think, Newt, you kind of alluded to that. I would have, now that I've read it again and it's up to date, I would have written the same thing the same way. Because think about it, what did I really write about? Something that was close to my heart. What was that? Freedom, liberty. Because I knew what it was like not to have freedom, not to have liberty. To all of my friends who I played football with, I was 12, 13, I came here when I was 12, they thought that the democracy was like breathing air. To me, it was something that Lincoln tried to achieve. I could see it, I could feel it. So writing this was an emotional thing. And I talk about liberty, and I ended up with, I hope someday that all the people in the world someday experience the same wonderful thing. And I talk about living in this heaven. All of these things are dreams, I am sure, that Lincoln might have dreamed of. And I didn't even know, except the 272 words. Yeah. I didn't even know that.
Well, in this regard, in the Gettysburg Address, and you alluded to it, Newt, in your essay, of the unfinished work he called upon us to do. What do you think today's unfinished work is? And I open this up to any of you, all of you, to respond to. Newt?
Well, as we see, sadly, in our country, the race issue is still unsolved. We have prejudice, but I think the point I tried to make in my essay is that the concept of equality, we started out in this country at the beginning saying that black people were 3/5 of a person, that women didn't even count. We started out, democracy keeps, we hope, as Sam says, he didn't know what democracy, we hope democracy keeps growing. And as John said, when he wrote the words, by the people, for the people, of the people, when he wrote them, that's the essence of it. Sadly to me, one thing we have not achieved in this country is that not enough people care enough about the political process and democracy to participate in it.
Well, I might jump on that if I can, because in the end, it's an uneven path, but the slope of the line has been up over the many years of our experience. And I think we should take satisfaction from that, but never be content. I, for one, believe that Lincoln, and I would hope contemporary America, would understand that melting pots and mosaics, all the metaphors we use for America are all very handy, all very worthy. But at the end of the day, the country will prosper and we will continue to have that upward slope of the line, notwithstanding individual diminishments from time to time that capture the imagination. But that slope of the line going upward depends on our embracing of shared values. And I think that essence of the shared value notion in America is very important. We can fly apart. We can be centrifugal with too much diversity. How's that for a shaking thought? But we need to center in on those things that keep us and make us Americans. And I think we would all agree that individual freedom is central to that, and respect and regard, but also pull on your own weight while having societal safety nets for those who need temporary, hopefully, help. But I come back to the shared values thing. I think we depart from that at our peril.
I think when Lincoln, what you're talking about is the unfinished business.
Yeah.
I think Lincoln had bigger visions. Yes, we're talking about this country, but the world shrank quite a bit, like you say, with emails, and it's become a bigger world. You hear on an accident in Paris, 2 seconds later you hear it here. I think if we look at it today, there may even be a lot more work to be done now than there was then, for many reasons. Number one, what was the population of the world when Lincoln lived? Anybody know? It was probably 500,000, 1 million, call it 1 billion, okay? But now it's over 7 billion. And everybody's got these big problems of freedom, sex slaves, and all of that, and we read about it here, and it moves right into this country. So when we talk about the job not finished, the job has even gotten bigger the way I see it.
So if the job has gotten bigger and the work is unfinished, do you think Lincoln would say, well, the job has gotten bigger, so I'm really impressed with what you've done in these years since I've left this earthly plane? Or would he say, wow, you have more unfinished business because you didn't handle it right? What do you think he might say?
I think he'd give us a passing grade, but he wouldn't give us an A. We wouldn't, we're not perfect, but I think with each generation, I think there is a extension of the concept of equality and the concept of that everybody should have a fair shot. I think each generation has extended that.
Well, when you use the term equality, you just defined it with your second words, Newt, did you not, that everyone should have a fair shot?
Right.
I mean, because some people take equality as a totally level economic and social and every kind of other playing field, and I don't think Lincoln had that in mind,
no.
And I don't think that benefits us as a nation, really. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Lincoln, the more you think about, a lot of people would say today, could Lincoln be elected president today?
Well, that's like asking what kind of car would he drive or something like that. I mean,
A Lincoln. He would drive a Lincoln, but
I drive a Lincoln.
No, but you know, I'm very involved with the presidential debates. Could Lincoln survive a presidential debate?
Well, he was a political pragmatist. I think that with his particular brand of humor and his almost parable-like instructions, that's why I view Lincoln as a great parabolist, trying to get messages through with indirect and easy-to-take messages. Sam, would you agree?
I think that Lincoln would have been number one on the stage. He
beat Donald Trump?
And you, and me, and everybody. I think he had a way of getting to people. He was simple. He used simple words. He drew pictures, and he knew how to listen. He knew how to listen to the others on the stage, and he might say they're kind of silly. Maybe more.
I don't know about you. I have seen the Steven Spielberg film 4 times.
Really?
Yes. I saw it twice in the theater, and then when it runs on television, I'll watch it again, because I learned more from it that I didn't see in the earlier viewing of it. And the power of his combination of intellect and heart is so it's overwhelming.
Well, if you read the interchange between in the Douglas Lincoln debates,
Yes.
for example, sometimes they go on for hours. You know, it would warm a lawyer's heart, I've got to tell you. The wisdom that comes out of that, but also contention. I mean, he was a toughie. Lincoln was a toughie, but he was unafraid. And I think Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, The Team of Rivals,
Yes.
showed how he had the wisdom to put together this very contentious lot to give us the kind of government we needed at that particular time. Someone said once that in times of crisis, America somehow surfaces that leader figure. Most of the time we don't need them. We just have average presidents, if you will. But we surface that spark of essential leadership required by the exigency of the moment. I would hope it would be true.
Well, you know, you mentioned the movie Lincoln, and 2 of the people responsible for that film, Steven Spielberg and Kathy Kennedy, who produced it, are also essayists in this book. And we're very grateful. In this regard, when we go back to the notion of could he be a worthy candidate today, is it because he was a consensus builder? And is it possible to build a consensus today without someone like a Lincoln?
Well, I would contend that he was more of a divisive force in terms of the political climate. I mean, he was either much loved or much hated.
Yes, I mean in terms of the team of rivals coming together.
Oh, the team of rivals.
Yes.
Well, even then, like Chase, for example, made no mystery of his own presidential ambitions.
Yes.
Lincoln was forever talking hardball politics. On the train to Gettysburg, he wasn't writing the address. He was working hardball politics with the Maryland folks and the Pennsylvania folks, trying to get things going. It was a real leadership chore that he was about in the practice of politics, which we can't get away from in America.
So what is it about Lincoln that makes him almost, he still resonates, and he's almost as popular today as he was 150 years ago? At the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum, we get requests from around the world for the loaning of artifacts and documents, because in other countries he's so well respected, and people constantly ask the question, what would Lincoln do? So what do you think it is about him that resonates, that makes people, I mean, we were shocked at the response to the book, that we've received over 1,000 essays, and that all the presidents wanted to respond. What is it about him that makes people wonder, what would Lincoln do in this situation? Or we want Lincoln where we are.
Reading the book, the biggest surprise when I read the book was the essay by President Jimmy Carter. And he tells a story, which I'd never heard before reading the book. When he was trying to negotiate an agreement between Israel and
And Egypt. Yeah.
Egypt,
Sadat.
and he had the Camp David period with Sadat and Begin, and he was at an impasse. And Jimmy, for those who haven't read the essay, Mrs. Carter suggested to President Carter that they'd reached an impasse, that he ought to take them to the Gettysburg and in a car, and maybe that would open up some discussion. And they went there, and to everyone's astonishment, Begin got up and by memory recited the Gettysburg Address. Imagine that. Not an American, an Israeli, but the power of that broke the ice, and they were able to go back to Camp David and have a discussion that led to an agreement between the Egyptians and the Israelis. Think of that Lincoln's words had opened that dialogue, which shows you the persistence and the value of his contribution to history.
Well, his message is universal. You don't have to be American to get that. So what's good here is good over there. And I agree with you that this particular story, which is also my favorite, I repeat that, might have changed history around because Sadat and Begin got together and they made peace, which the other Arab nations hadn't done. And I think that peace is still here today. And what a big, powerful thing that is. And heavens knows what other things that Lincoln has done that saved the world. Yes,
when we received the essay, and the essay from President Carter was about the 9th one we received. So you can imagine, we tear open the Federal Express envelope and open and we're like, what's inside? And we pull this out and we read this essay. And that was the point at which we realized that this 272-word project was actually not just talking about history, but that it was making history. Correct. Because at that moment, there were a few of us in the room, and we thought, my goodness, someone bring the white gloves, because we always hold our artifacts and documents in white gloves. And we said, this is an artifact, and we're making history. And what we're very pleased about is that all your essays and all the essays, the more than 1,000 we received, will be part of a permanent archive at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. And we'll also be sharing them with the world. So that was just such an honor for us. And then as we received other essays from other people of note, I want to ask a kind of a fun question. How was it writing it out by hand? Because we wanted to take you further in the footsteps of Lincoln, who didn't have a computer. How was that?
It may be the only legible thing I've done in the last 15 years.
How many times did it take you, Newt?
My penmanship is very poor, and it was. It reminds me of our daughter Martha. Once, she's now the dean at Harvard Law School, who's a serious scholar. She got a prize at the University of Michigan in writing. And my wife, Jo, told her mother about it, and she said, she got a prize in writing. Her handwriting is terrible. But this was good practice for us to write it out.
And Sam, what was it like for you? Because now here you were rewriting an essay you had written as a teenager. What was it like for you?
I kind of liked it. I felt I should do more of it. You see, when I was a little boy, my father in Europe, my birth father, he was what they call a soifer. A soifer is a scribe. And I remember as a little boy, he was writing the Torah.
Really?
I remember as a little boy standing, my eyes came up as high as the table, and he would dip his pen in black ink. And you've seen the Torahs, and each little letter had to be painted perfectly, day in and day out. And I'm thinking, look at me, Sam. You're writing one letter every so many years. So I kind of liked going back to that.
I love your story because your father's story is reminiscent of Lincoln, and one of the prized artifacts that we have in our collection is a quill pen. Mm-hmm. The fountain pen had been invented by the time it was 1865, the last year of his presidency, and yet he preferred to write with a quill, and the quill pen that was left on his desk is now in our collection. And it's always an honor to put it out. But a funny story about one of the people writing it out by hand, we received a call from Colin Powell's office. And it was someone who worked with him, and they said, General Powell has finished his essay, and we were so honored. And then they said, he's on the third draft of trying to write it out longhand. Can he print it? I said General Powell could do whatever he wants to do. And it came beautifully printed on 5 sheets of paper.
You know, we talked about that. I've been with Colin. He's a White House fellow, you know, and I've been too. And we've met in the course of some things over the last 6 months, and we talked about that chore that you put us through, and it was that. But the greater message, by extension, I appreciate my colleagues here commenting. I worry that all this modern stuff that you reference, Newt, makes so much of what we do ephemeral that there's no record of it. We live on emails or quick messages, and just think if John and Abigail Adams, for example, hadn't left all those wonderful letters, and somehow we've got, and we write personal notes, but normally they're just quick thank you notes for courtesies, experience, but substantive stuff, I fear, is being lost on a voluminous and daily basis. So that concerns me. What do you guys think?
Well, I think it's true. Now, in Lincoln's case, I believe more books, more films, more television programs have been written about Lincoln than anyone else in American history.
In American history, yes, and second only to Jesus Christ.
My daughter Nell has an essay in the book, and she counted the number of films about Lincoln that have been produced. And there's no question they're like 3 times more than anyone else in American history. And I think if you go around the world, everywhere, Lincoln is known, which is an amazing thing after all.
There was a number, and it said in Google that there are 16,000 books written about Lincoln. 16,000.
And new ones.
Yes.
They're coming out all the time, sure.
All the time.
Yes, and one of the things we were pleased with was, and when we started this project, we had no clue it was going to result in a book. It was for an exhibit called The Power of Words. And so, you know, we had no clue that we'd have the response and that it would be something new that could be put into a book. Because with 18,000 books or 16,000 books, you think everything has been written. But I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, the Lincoln onion still has a lot more to be peeled. What do you think about that?
I put it in a context of world activity, and I don't like this, but one of those phrases that the Platonian concept that only the dead have seen the end of war. If you look at the nations of the world, those who I would call successful nations, most, if not all, can trace their development through a period of not just one civil war, but multiple civil wars, occasioned by differing religious beliefs or political beliefs, or in our case, we've experienced one major civil war where the casualties of that terrible enterprise have equaled all the casualties of all the other wars that we've had in our history. So you almost wonder if civil war isn't a rite of passage to a better place, or you would hope it would be. Who is it in that? The Skin of Our Teeth, John Q. Public comes home from the war,
right,
and he's sitting there having a cup of tea, and they're querying him about how it's going to be so great now, and he comes up with the opinion, I think I've got this right, correct me, Newt, if I'm wrong, or Sam. In war you hope for a better life, but in peace you look for a comfortable one. And when you seek too much comfort, frankly, as a nation or as people, you lose your edge, and then you fall prey to the kinds of forces that can put you back into, as unthinkable as it is, into actual physical conflict. And it can come at you with constellations of intractable political forces where rational actor models no longer apply, and where the worrisome things happen and take us down that terrible path. So I reflect on that because I think we need to be cautioned to ourselves But I come back to the notion, I wish we had a lot more handwritten stuff that we'd be able to refer to through the generations. I wish I had the discipline to write more notes. I wish you did with all of your background. And you.
I think we could write a lot more about Lincoln. The other day I went through my wallet and I carried something with me. I'd forgotten about it, and I've always had it with me. We always think that Lincoln was such a big success. He wasn't always. And I carried this with me and I use it with young people. What is it? It's the 12 things that Lincoln failed at. And what, as a younger man, and what I taught other people is, look at all these 12 things that he failed at. And it goes through marriage and defeat and in the fleet and legislature and losing his children. It's got all 12 things. And he had the ability to pick himself up, to become one of the greatest people that ever walked this earth. Like you say, only more books about Jesus Christ. I want to throw Moses in there too.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, if he lived today as a child, he would certainly be considered an underserved or disadvantaged youth who we would hope gets a shot. With 1 year of formal education, growing up in a cabin with a dirt floor, not getting along with his father, mother dying at an early age. So you're absolutely right. And before we get off that one other question that we had, you mentioned President Carter's essay. Do either of you have a favorite essay in the book?
Absolutely. I don't think I pronounce it correctly, but when people talk about Gettysburg Replies, besides telling them to read what Newt and Sam wrote, ever politic, the guy Patil, Etan Patil, the guy who is the head of the interfaith unit, or interfaith organization.
Ibu Patel.
I think that he comes as close to capturing the essence of what it is to see what I'll call the new America, the America that you saw coming off the ship, that anyone captured in the book. And I keep going back to it. The beauty of that book is, like a book of poetry, you can dive in and dive out of it and not feel that you've been shortchanged if you just want to put it down and do something else. Watch the Bears win another game, for example. That's the one that struck me the most.
Sam, do you have?
I'd like to say the ones that you gentlemen wrote are all excellent, but I'll pick the one you picked. And the reason, because it made such a big difference in the world. Right. It shows that two people who don't even want to speak together, be together. In that essay, Jimmy Carter had to sit in the limousine between them so they wouldn't disagree. So because of that, I too picked this one as my favorite essay.
I don't think Jimmy Carter told that story before your book.
Which for us, when I opened it up and pulled it out of the envelope, always thinking, what is a historic artifact? What is a document? I was reading it and I thought, outside of President Carter, who actually typed his on a typewriter, and I was trying to get, is it a Remington, and is it, that we might be the first people reading this in history, and that in of itself was history, and that we needed to write down for your essay and your poem and your essay the provenance of what you wrote, so that 300 years from now we could talk about how do we come up with your essay, and how do we come up with your poem, and how do we come up with your essay, and people will understand the context in which we receive them.
How many books have actually been published? What's the first edition run?
That I wish I could tell you.
10,000 or so? Or
it's more than that, I think.
More than that? Because I keep touting it to people. I'm going to give a bunch away at Christmas time, and that it really is a collector's item. I think you've done a marvelous job, Carl, with putting this together.
We're very grateful, and we're grateful to the Pritzker Military Library and Museum for giving us this opportunity, and obviously for you all to participate. And one of the things that I wanted to get your opinions on is, what is it that you personally each love about Lincoln? You don't have to go in order, right?
Okay, I'll speak first. I'm moving along in age, as we all are. And I've tried to look to see the importance of life. And one of the things that, many things Lincoln has, but one that I really love is his name, Honest Abe. He was an honest man. What a way to get started. He was honest with his people. He was honest with himself. He was an honest man, and he got that. So that if you're asking just for one thing, that would be the one thing that I would say I like.
Recently, we had a dinner party and went around a table of 8 or 10 and asked for everyone to identify one quality that they would like to see in their president. And honesty was one of the first characteristics that came out. And so I just want to amplify on what Sam said, because as we citizens make choices with respect to our future, and it has to be inextricably linked to the political process at city, state, and national levels, I think we would be wise to carry a list of characteristics we want to see in our political figures, our leadership figures, knowing full well that we may be disappointed in a characteristic or two, and that we are all human and that there are failings. But the discussion over honesty, and that's what I'm going to come back to, is that is the sine qua non, because if we accept a political process or a political person who looks you in the eye and tells you something that you know is a falsehood or has no possibility of being believed, then I think that would be, in Lincoln's view and in my view, disqualifying for holding a public office. So I think I'm expanding on what you said. I may not agree with them, may have hard choices politically or on various issues, but if I'm getting an honest response, then I will be satisfied that individual has a shot at doing what's good for the country, no matter where the position is in the hierarchy of city, state, or nation. I think Lincoln would like that.
I think the Gettysburg Address, for the first time, gave me an insight into American history I didn't have before. That, as he says at the beginning, 77 years ago, our forefathers brought forth a new idea, that there could be a country, a society, where it was dedicated to the idea of freedom and liberty. That never happened before. There were no other country in the world started out with that concept. And then he said, we're testing whether that concept can last. And it gave me a sense of American history that I had never had before.
And to follow up on that, I've been fortunate to live around the world, as we all have in one way or another, or traveled. But I am constantly heartened by that one question that you get wherever you go, in advanced countries or developing countries, and that is, how do I get to America? How do I get to America? And as long as that question is still asked with the intensity that it is asked, then I think that somehow, for all our stubbing of toes on issues that achieve such attention, we're still on that upward path. If you just look, to be specific about a statistic, back in Lincoln's time and around the turn of the century, the average age for men was about 47 years. turn of the century, and now, of course, we're into the 80s. And this affects all groups in America. You talked about equality. All groups in America, independent of poverty or independent of race or creed, whatever, have experienced that growth in longevity. There has to be something said good about the innate American experience just on that one measure of merit.
Well, Newt, you mentioned the Declaration of Independence, which Lincoln is referencing in fourscore and seven. Excuse me. And we talked about the Statue of Liberty that you saw when you were coming in on the Ernie Pyle. Do you think Lincoln would think what's written at the base of the Statue of Liberty, bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, given the state of affairs today with the refugees, do you think he would say to us today, if he were president, just like he said we have to live up to the Declaration of Independence, that we have to live up to what's at the base of that statue?
I believe he would. I believe President Lincoln believed in the ideas that are expressed at the Statue of Liberty. He said them here in the Gettysburg Address. Yes, so I'd say yes.
I too believe that he would be welcoming, but I think given the path of development of the country as a pragmatic politician, that he wouldn't throw the doors open and say, y'all come, that there would be a legitimate process that would be welcoming, but there would be a process. We can, in my personal view, lose the country if we abandon legitimate process, and I think Lincoln would support that.
I agree.
So it's a balance.
And Sam, since you saw that statue coming in, do you have something? And then I think we'll open it up to questions. Do you have anything? Do you feel?
Yeah, it would be funny if I didn't agree with that Lincoln is welcoming all these people.
Yeah.
Where am I? No, I think Lincoln, the word poor, the common man, he had a big heart for them, and he would let them in, of course, in accordance to modern times and the way we live today. In what you were saying, we do it the proper way. But yes, give me your poor. That would be the poem that he would like.
Yes, I think so.
And I'm for it too, by the way.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
I just want to say one thing. Carla, the book was your idea.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, well, thank you.
And we salute you because it was one great idea.
Thank you so much.
Here, let me second that.
Thank you so much. So, are we ready for some questions from the audience?
Sure.
I want the easy ones.
Okay.
But they get the
You've
hard
heard
ones.
it.
I'm not sure who induced or inspired you to memorize the Gettysburg Address.
You
My
either have
grandfather.
to shout or come whisper seductively, because I can't.
Well, I can do either. Is that better?
The question is?
I'm interested in who induced or inspired you to memorize the Gettysburg Address. My grandfather offered a silver dollar to his first grandchild who could do this, and I got halfway through but was not the lucky winner.
When I grew up, it was a schoolboy chore on the south side of Chicago at Cornell Grammar School in Chatham or Grand Crossing, where I grew up. I referenced the prison experience. In fact, someone had memorized, and we were all able to piece it together. But in truth, when Carla said, would you do that? And she said, and make darn sure you memorize it. I've spent the last 3 days, driving down here. I live in Rockford now, and driving down, talking to myself and having people look at me strangely as we were there.
I agree he deserves the 50 cents for tonight's performance. So.
A penny. But
I'm so glad I went through that chore again, and we'll during the holiday season make sure the family gets the full measure of dramatic reading, whether they want it or not.
Another question?
Another great speech by Lincoln was his Cooper Union speech in New York. I don't know how many people have read it, but it is certainly worth reading. It reads like a logician's treatise and shows his great, great intellect. Could you comment on that as it comes out in the Gettysburg Address?
You want to take a shot?
You go ahead.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that it's known that he set forth guiding principles for not only his administration, but for his view of America in the Cooper Union speech. I wish I could reference it and be so facile with the words there, but I can't, other than to know it had tremendous importance at the time, and the words obviously live today, but don't have the same standing, if you will, as the Gettysburg. So I'm wimping out on your question, is what I'm doing. Maybe you can cover
the other great speech is the second inaugural. The second inaugural speech is almost, not quite, almost at the level of the Gettysburg Address.
My favorite place in Washington used to be, still is actually, but you used to be able to drive there and park, and it would be the Lincoln Memorial at midnight. And you would go up there and you could have it all to yourself. And they used to have a little Smokey the Bear guy who was in the little house there, and you could ask him to give you a private lecture on the statue and on its formation, on the second inaugural, obviously. And it wasn't, and I've done that for years and years and years. In fact, the first time I was there, I was a lieutenant in uniform walking across the street from the mall area, and a rather demanding, heavy-set woman said to me, "Well," and I said, "Well?" She said, "Well, when are you going to?" And I said, "I'm a second lieutenant." She said, "When are you going to stop the traffic?" And so I said, "Well, immediately." And I stopped the traffic and went up to the Lincoln. But the real telling thing, going back to your equality points, if you go down into the stairs where they have at the Lincoln, you can go down a flight, you see nods, and you see that Taft in 1922, as the Chief Justice, gave the remarks at the statue's inauguration, and then you look out on the crowd, and the crowd is divided. They have the blacks on one side and they have whites on the other at the inauguration of the Lincoln Memorial. And somehow that twisted in my gut, but times change, thankfully. And again, I come back to the embracing of shared values as so important to, I think, the Lincoln vision. But obviously, still is my favorite place to go to and to take people to in all of Washington. So.
Well, and it's interesting that you should say that, because every year we give a thing called the Lincoln Leadership Prize, and last year we awarded it to the Little Rock Nine. And for us, it was a kind of a rejuvenating, redeeming rebirth of freedom, because it was our kind of way to say what happened at the dedication. We didn't speak about the dedication specifically, but that we still had unfinished work. And for us, it was at least some way to say to the Little Rock Nine, you know, what happened to you in the 50s was unfinished work. We should have fixed that sooner than then, but we fixed it now, and we still are fixing it. It's a work in progress.
I acknowledge that point, but in truth, there is a great writer. In fact, at his memorial service in the National Cathedral, President Clinton called this man the citizen of our times, and that man is John Gardner. And if you've not read any of John Gardner's books on leadership, excellence, the self-renewal, we ought to rush out right now and buy all of John Gardner's books and read them. Right. But it was, and you know John Gardner so well, but it was his view that we ought not to carry the burdens of yesteryear, but that we always ought to be about national renewal, and we ought to have a forward orientation. And quoting him imperfectly, that our task is always finished. There's always unfinished work. We always have to renew and advance the primal forces of this country. And you can get into deep water here in a hurry for insensitivity and all of that, but I would rather be accused of that rather than deny the fact that we all have to pull on the rope to get us out there, and it's not going to happen. I just read a book recently called The Atomic Girls, and it talks about Oak Ridge and how they put it together. And they talked about how there were differing treatments of the various people there depending on what they were doing, and great secrecy, and 100,000 or more people in the Manhattan Project, and nobody was supposed to know they were there. And it comes from your generation, dude. I say we walk in the shadow of the World War II generation, because this person who was a minority was queried about unequal treatment, and she said, you know, we weren't a generation of whiners. We weren't a generation of whiners. And I think we need less whining and more performance and more linking arms and going together as one people in America. And I think Lincoln would support that. Certainly, he took a stand that tried to move us in that direction.
Adding to what you say, I remember I must have been 12, 13 years old when I first learned to speak English. Somebody gave me a book on Lincoln. The reason I know that is because I was asked to give the 8th grade graduating speech, which I found not too long ago. And Lincoln gave a speech once, and somewhere I found that I wanted to close my little speech from 8th grade graduation. And he asked the audience, he says, if you call a dog's tail a leg, how many legs does a dog have? That was his question. I remembered it well. The point being is calling our democracy a democracy doesn't make it a democracy. We have to live it and fight it every single day, just like you did as a soldier.
Just like we all do as citizens, but maybe we got some more questions out there.
Was the purpose of the Gettysburg Address to define the nature of what the United States is as a nation?
I think from my perspective, it was to define what Lincoln hoped we would be in large measure as a nation, and that the refiner's fire of the Civil War would somehow bring us out more steeled as a nation. I go back to that chilling observation that Newton made about his assassination being terrible, but in some ways very timely for ensuring that the impact of Lincoln would endure through the years, and that his words would have even greater worth and value. But that's how I see the Gettysburg as kind of an impetus forward for us.
I think that's exactly right. I think the idea was to go to the scene of the terrible battle and to commemorate the soldiers, the people who died there. But his point was far beyond that. His point was, why did they die, and let's carry on the vision, the ideals that were at stake here. So I've read a lot about how he wrote the speech. You know, some people say he scribbled it out himself on the train. That isn't true. He'd been working on it, and
you know, it's when you think of the speech again, and it's somewhat like Grail lore. People are still proceeding about how this speech took form and its impact. But when Lincoln finished the speech, speaking as we have to speak now to 10,000 people, you can imagine how hard it was to project the crowd. Some say there wasn't much of a crowd reaction, although there was crowd reaction apparently in the course of the speech as he hit those key points in the 10 sentences, especially emphasizing the word here again and again. But he sat down and he remarked to somebody that I think it was pretty flat and the people didn't appreciate it. And Everett penned him a note that he received the next day that said, "You did more in 2 minutes than I did in 2 hours. It was magnificent," or things to that effect. And Lincoln penned him a note back saying, "Boy, you make me feel pretty good about that," because I wanted it to be a good speech. So
I think, in partial answer to you, is I think Lincoln liked what Jefferson wrote, and I think he wanted to promote it. That all men are created equal, and they're endowed by their Creator, and this is what he liked. He wanted to promote it all the way through now and forever.
I want to thank you all. Thank you to Dr. Carla Nurowski, General John Borling, Samuel R. Harris, and Newton Minow for a truly outstanding discussion, and to the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation for sponsoring this program. The book is Gettysburg Replies: The World Responds to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, published by Lyons Press. To learn more about the book, our sponsor, or the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, visit us in person or online at pritzkermilitary.org. Thank you, and please join us next time on Pritzker Military Presents.
Pritzker Military Presents is made possible by members of the Pritzker Military Museum and Library and its sponsors. The views and opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of the museum and library. If you would like to be a part of our studio audience, become a member, or learn more, visit pritzkermilitary.org. The preceding program was produced by the Pritzker Military Museum and Library.